just have to do a postscript. I mean, we've had some wonderful, wonderful, wonderful comments off it, and I know I have just 5 minutes. So I'm going to focus on what schools need to do. But I will say this, there's only one institution in this country, only one, that's shared by all Americans. I want you to think about that. 88% of all Americans walk through a public school door. It is the only institution where we have an opportunity to talk about shared values and shared goals. One of the concerns I have as we talk about dropouts, and I want to share this with my colleagues as the superintendent of schools, it doesn't start in high school. And kids don't walk in and say, officially, Ms. Johnson, I'm dropping out of school. You don't get that formal announcement. It begins very early, and in some cases, right after birth. But certainly when they get into elementary school, here are some of the things that you see. You see youngsters who are unable to attend for long periods of time because they come from home environments that are often dysfunctional. Don't think kids can't read, guys, because they can. They can't read for understanding. Every 2-year-old can tell you where McDonald's and Wendy's are, but they can't read for understanding. That makes a huge difference. They have poor attendance. And because of this inability to sustain themselves, guess what? They're more likely to be suspended. They're more likely to be placed in special education. They're more likely to be denied the enrichment classes. Nothing's worse than a teacher walking into a classroom and saying, will the gifted kids please stand? And out they walk with the teacher. We eliminated that because it was just a horrible thought for a child to sit there and watch, quote, the gifted kids walk out the door. And if you're a dysfunctional youngster in the eyes of a teacher, you're not in that gifted class. And some of the most talented young people we have are youngsters who are not being recognized because they bring these problems of abuse and dysfunction into the classroom. So I'm going to tell you that you need to go to a website and look at something that Colin Powell has done, the America Promise Alliance. He has a Gallup student poll, which I can't talk a lot about today, but here's the scary thing. They measure students' sense of their control over their future. And what he has found so far is that only 1/3 of American students surveyed feel they're ready for the future. Just 1/3 of over 500,000 students that have been surveyed. So we did initiate that survey in Peekskill, and I will not share the results with you. But I will say it is a strategic tool for every school district to use in thinking about whether or not their children are ready for success. So I'll just focus on, in the few minutes I have, what I think we need to do. This may shock you. High school graduation is not a mandate. It is not a mandate in this country. We need to mandate high school graduation for all of our students. It needs to become compulsory. School attendance to the age of 17 is compulsory. The diploma is not. And that needs to change. One of the things I often think about in terms of moral will is that moral will is only the first step to legislation. Moral will alone in this country doesn't work. It needs to be followed by the Harry Truman episode. You need the legislation in place to make it work. So we need to mandate high school graduation. We need to have alternative centers for high school graduation. The traditional route of one way to graduate for all kids is totally obsolete in the 21st century. Virtual learning centers, schools that do not look at Carnegie units or seat time. Imagine if you allowed a student to take the course and the Regents exam when he or she was ready for that exam, and not because it was January or June. Think about that. Maybe it would take me 3 years to get out of school, maybe it would take me 5. But if it's mandated, I need to take that test when I'm ready, which means the test becomes a measure of knowledge, not a competition. And that's what's wrong with testing today. It's not looked at as a measure of knowledge, but it's looked at as a source of competition for schools. Make sure, and I heard this from my colleague, that all of our students have individualized attention, especially the poignant stories we just heard about kids who have no one in their lives who can say, show me your homework. How are you doing? And it's not that the parents don't care. Let's never say that. They don't know how to help their children. There isn't a parent in this planet that doesn't want a better life for his or her child, but too many of them are too involved. I want us to act early on, with kindergarten on, to identify these students so they don't depart from school. We need to look at alternatives to special ed. That has become a real problem. And I will tell you, in Peekskill, I fight it every step of the way because it's a two-tiered system and it does not give kids the graduation requirements that they need to be successful in school. One of the big pieces that we need to work on some more is involving families in learning at school and at home. Now, don't ask the parent to read to your child because maybe he or she can't. But you know what a parent can do? You can give them a set of questions that allow them to say to their child, tell me what the story's all about. Think about what we've just done here. The parent is asking the youngster to read to the parent. But you do need to have those connections. So we need tools for parents so they can become more involved in the learning of their children. We need a better way to evaluate and monitor individual student progress. We really do need good data systems in our schools so we can look at students on a one-by-one basis. We need, and you've heard this over and over again, this is a community effort. Remember that motto that Hillary came up with, it takes a village? Guys, it really takes a village. We cannot do this by ourselves, but we haven't really defined collaboration well yet, and I think that's something to work on. You bring the resources to the table, and everyone needs to walk away with an assignment. It isn't enough to say, here are the resources. There needs to be a master plan, there needs to be assignments, and there needs to be follow-up, which is what I'm doing. If you wonder, I thought I was going to retire, but what I'm doing right now is working with the NAACP in Ramapo on these very, very significant issues. One important issue that I know you're wondering whether I'm going to mention, and I will, and that is, what does it mean to be an effective teacher? The most important person in the life of a child during the school day is the person that stands in front of their classroom. You have 3 years of a bad teacher or bad teaching, and you may never be successful in school. That's how powerful the teacher is. So go back again to another study that's being done by Gallup, and you'll see the characteristics of effective teachers. Just one quick story. In the same hotel, we do a fair every year, career fair, to look at teacher candidates. And I came in to sit with the interview team, but the candidates didn't know that I was superintendent of schools. I had on jeans and a shirt. And I said, can I interview a couple of the folks? Because I'm curious as to who's coming. And women sat down, and I had this normal conversation. Then I said, by the way, do you view this as a job or a mission? She looked at me in total disbelief and said, you gotta be kidding, this is a job. I said, thank you very much. That was the end of that candidate. There's reason for telling you that little anecdote. It is not a job. Teaching is, as Frank said, a mission and a calling. It is not just an 8 to 3 perspective as the world misunderstands. We're in it 24/7 because those kids need us 24/7. When they argue about teacher pay, I become really upset because you have no idea, many people, how many hours and the commitment teachers put into I think that we've gone a little too far with zero tolerance policies. It doesn't allow us to understand what This doesn't mean, by the way, that you can take the money out of the cash. It does mean that kids need to be taught, and there need to be awards and rewards for effective behavior. You know, there's something called school readiness that our kindergarten teachers expect of our kids. You come out of a middle-class family, you know what that is just naturally. You're expected to come into school with your pencil sharpened and your iPad, by the way, not textbook anymore, but your iPad. And you're supposed to sit there and raise your hand and respond appropriately. You know you're taught that. Do you know that doesn't come naturally? You're not born with school readiness. And so we have to teach our kids school readiness. So when you do get the youngster who doesn't know how to sit, that isn't a zero tolerance policy contradiction. That is, let's show this child how to sit in a classroom. When a kid acts out and bullies another student, and bullying is totally unacceptable, that's a teachable moment, and that's how it needs to be looked at. We have to remember that school is the place that prepares our young people to be tomorrow's adult citizens. They represent what we want the world to look like in the next decade or two. We do our jobs poorly, guys. We get what we deserve. I've had 40 wonderful years in education. I am still very committed to our children and to the issues that face us. And as I said to someone, it would have been great to go off and play golf, but there are too many issues yet to be addressed. And no one is allowing me to go off and play golf. But I have really appreciated being here this morning. Did I just take my 5 minutes? Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. I'm Cora Greenberg, the Executive Director of the Westchester Children's Association, and I just so much appreciate all of our speakers today. It really gave us so much meaty stuff to go forward with, and not just to think about, but to actually do something with, and you'll all be hearing from us. We have gone over, I thank everyone for staying, because this was such a great, great program, and everybody was so inspiring. We have time for just a few questions. I do want to mention that the African American Men of Westchester has a program next Thursday night at Iona in the evening, beginning I think at 6:30.